Autumn. Hello. It is the official start of the autumn season for 2023, and I know it is happening because the leaves are starting to fall off from the trees here in London, and it's getting slightly more blustery outside. So I've created a to-be-read pile for this season, because when I think of autumn or fall, I think of more like darker books, slightly more contemplative books as well. So I've set a reading list specifically around that, and of 10 books. So I'm going to go through each of these titles, discuss why I'm interested in reading them. I'd love to know if you would also like to join me along with reading any of these books, if you're interested in them, or if you have read them, or if there are other books that you are specifically looking forward to reading this autumn season. And obviously these books can be read at any time of the year, but it's just more fun to match your reading, with the weather outside. So to begin with, there is the novel Beyond the Sea by Paul Lynch. This was published in 2019, and recently I read his most recent novel, Prophet Song, which I found really powerful. It was the first book I'd read by him, so I want to read some more of his fiction. And this novel is about two men that are sailing around South America, but then things go wrong. They get lost at sea, and so it's about this perilous voyage. And so it's kind of part adventure story, but also it's said to be a part existentialist fable. And I just love books that are set at sea, and this very solitary time of being set adrift in the ocean seems to provoke a lot more contemplation about your life. Laurie and Joe by Amy Arnold. I picked this novel to read because it's set during one day in November, but over the course of the book, it is looking back over the history between this couple. So it begins with Laurie discovering Joe has died. They've lived together for many years in a very remote region near the Lake District in England, and so after she discovers he's died, she doesn't report his death, and instead thinks about their life together, and the troubles that they've experienced, and that she's experienced in particular in this very claustrophobic relationship. So it sounds like another very contemplative story. Lamb by Matt Hill. This is a brand new novel which actually hasn't come out yet. I was sent this advance copy of it. It's going to come out in the next few weeks, and it just sounds like a very dark and moody sort of book for the autumn period. So it's about a young man whose father commits a horrific act, and his mother tries to shield him from the truth about what happened, and it's about him going on this voyage of discovery, of trying to find out the truth, but also what he wants in his life. So it's described as a book about our collective memory, but also it says it's about moss-coated horror, which sounds perfect for the season. I also have a couple of classic, much older books that I'm interested in reading. So there's The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington, which was first published in 1976. And Leonora Carrington was a surrealist painter of the past century. She had an absolutely fascinating life. She was involved in a number of artistic movements, and knew a number of famous painters, was married multiple times, and had a very long life for herself. And this novel centers around a much older female protagonist, and I always like stories about very old protagonists. A woman in her 90s who uses her hearing trumpet to overhear that her family wants to put her away in a home, and so it follows her life as she's put in this institution where she, which is very constrictive, and which kind of reminds me of like the Golden Girls and sort of like Shady Pines, Ma, that kind of atmosphere. But then she's given this text, and this allows her to go on this kind of surrealist ghost journey. It sounds really fascinating and interesting. So this was reprinted by Penguin Modern Classics a number of years ago with a new introduction by Ali Smith. And then there is Carmen by Prosper Merimee. This was first published in 1845, and this novella inspired a very famous opera. It's a story about a man who becomes involved with a woman, and he becomes really infatuated with her, but she leads him into a life of increasing degeneracy and crime, kind of leads him into the seedy underworld. She's a kind of prototype for this amoral femme fatale character, which has been seen in a lot of fiction since then. And I want to read this for a particular reason, because it was given to me actually because I'll be traveling to Spain later in October. So I wanted to read a classic story that's set in Spain, and even though the author is French, this is a Spanish story. My Men by Victoria Kielland. This is a novel about America's first known female serial killer. It's about a Norwegian woman who leaves her native country to America, where she establishes a new name for herself called Bella, and has affairs with a number of men, and which get increasingly violent, and she eventually kills a number of them. So it's following her story from her perspective, kind of recreating this historic tale from a personal point of view. And I think that sounds so fascinating. And also it's translated by Damion Searls, who's translated authors, Norwegian authors I've enjoyed reading in the past. So I'm very curious about this historical novel. When Ghosts Come Home by Wiley Cash. This is a novel set on an island where a plane crash occurs and a dead body is found, and it's about the mystery surrounding that, but also a few different characters of a sheriff who's seeking to get re-elected, and a woman who has returned to this island after being away for a while, and the FBI involvement in this case. Yeah, it sounds like a very mysterious story, but it's also about race and seeking justice. So it sounds like a really fascinating story. I also have a couple of short story collections I'd like to read, because I feel, especially at this time of year, I like consuming shorter bits of fiction, especially in the morning. So there's the recent collection called 19 Claws and a Blackbird, which feels like really good for the Halloween season, by an Argentinian author called Augustina Bazterrica. And these are described as macabre tales that look at the violence that is simmering behind the gleaming facades of people's lives. They are quite short tales and stories, so you'll see that there are some that are maybe 20 pages long, but a number of them are only a few pages long, so they feel like these stories that can be consumed in these bite-sized chunks. All the Beloved Ghosts by Alison MacLeod. This is a short story collection, which I picked it because it has ghosts in the title, so it seems like another good choice for the Halloween season. But a lot of these stories explore the line between life and death, but they also explore the line between fact and fiction. Some of the stories are looking at kind of literary history, so there's someone that goes to visit Sylvia Plath's grave, and another story is about a child of the Bloomsbury group, and is kind of witnessing the ghosts of this past artistic group. And Alison MacLeod seems to be an author that's really interested in literary history in particular, because I read her more recent novel. This collection came out a number of years ago, but a year or two ago she published a very long novel called Tenderness, which is partly about the life of D.H. Lawrence and his writing the novel Lady Chatterley's Lover, but it's also about the obscenity trial around that novel and Jacqueline Kennedy's interest in that book. And I loved that novel. I felt like it really deserved deserve to get some more like recognition and to be read more widely. So I've been wanting to read more of her fiction, and I think these stories will be a great place to dip into. And finally, I'd like to read some more nonfiction this autumn season, and a recent memoir or anti-memoir that I've been really meaning to get to, and which has been so critically acclaimed, is Wish I Was Here by M. John Harrison, who's a writer who has produced a wide variety of literature over the course of his life, a lot of experimental fiction, and this memoir is no exception. It's also a kind of experimental memoir looking over his life, how much you can contain a life within a narrative, and how much you can understand about literature that's produced by someone, you know, from the life that they lived. It sounds so fascinating, and like I said, I've read nothing but good reviews and a lot of acclaim by it by readers who have experienced this book. So those are the 10 different books that I want to read over the autumn season. Like I said, I'd love to know if you're interested in reading any of these books as well, or if you have choices for the autumn season specifically that you want to get to soon. I'd love to hear about that in the comments below. But thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and staying inside, staying warm out of the blustery, rainy weather, if you do have that near you. We've been getting a lot of that here in London, but I hope you're doing well. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.